Hello, Des Moines Public Schools community. I hope all of you are feeling well and are healthy and that your families are doing fine. My name is Tom Ahart, Superintendent of Des Moines Public Schools, and with me on this recording is Shashank Arora, the Chief Financial Officer for Des Moines Public Schools. We are trying something new this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so are holding our public budget forum virtually. So you will receive information on the proposed budget for the 2020-2021 school year or fiscal year 2021. And we will have an opportunity for public comment for about 10 days before bringing the proposed budget to our school board for certification at our May 19th school board meeting. Thank you for joining us virtually. And Shashank will share with you later on in the presentation how you can submit questions and receive answers to those questions so that we have a feedback loop, which is the intention of these budget public forums. With that, I will turn things over to Shashank Arora. Shashank?
Thank you, Tom. Hello. These sure are strange circumstances, and FY21 would definitely be a challenging year, to say the least. We are in uncharted waters with no playbook for COVID. There's a lack of clarity at this point in time, both from FEMA and from CARES, as to what and how much will get reimbursed. And that is the biggest unknown that we have in FY20 fourth quarter, as well as in fiscal year 21. We as a district have continued to invest in food and technology, and those are the biggest costs that we are incurring as of now, especially related to COVID. The other thing I would want to mention is that both the income tax and sales tax collection for the state will be lower than what we were projecting just 3 months back. And we don't know how that would impact our budget and the funding from the state. With that, I would start sharing my presentation. So what we want to cover today is basically a list of few items, which is what is the calendar that we have worked with for the FY21 or the fiscal year 21 budget? What are the budget development constraints for the district? What has been our financial strategy? And what exactly is the board adopting? The long-term considerations for the forecast, and then we'll close with some of the questions. So that was the agenda. I'll roll over to the budget calendar. So we, as a district, start working on the budget sometime in the summer of each year. And as usual, we did start in the summer of this year with little knowledge as to what COVID will be bringing to us. The other thing that I wanted to highlight in this slide is that the budget will be published in the Des Moines Register between April 29th and May 8th. And the virtual public forum, which we are recording right now, would be posted on the Des Moines site starting today and will be available till the 15th of May. The public hearing where the board will adopt the budget will be held on May 19th. So what are the budget constraints? In the development of the budget, we have to keep these following constraints in mind, which are that the SMART goals that were set by the board, how are we dialing into our budget, what the management limitations are, the restricted budget, and the spending authority. And I wanted to share briefly over here as to what are the SMART goals for the district. The first goal was increased student achievement in reading for all third grade students from 52% to 72% by June of 2023, as measured by FAST. The second goal was increase student achievement in reading for Black males for all third grade students from 35 to 72% by June 2023. And the third goal was to increase the student achievement in mathematics for Black males completing Algebra 1 with B or higher by the end of 9th grade to increase from 17% to 35% by August of 2023. I think all of you must have seen the SMART goals, but since this drives a lot of our decisions, we wanted to share the SMART goals with all of you today. What are the financial limitations under which the district has to work with? The financial planning for any fiscal year should not deviate materially from the board students' expectations. And this policy can be found on the DMPS website. Also, the superintendent shall not present a budget that falls below 15% solvency ratio and 15% unspent spending authority, or that is what is the long-term goal and aim of the district, and we should try to achieve that. And the last thing that I would want to highlight on this slide is that the expenditure of the funds should not be more than the revenue that we will be receiving for the fiscal year, which is basically a balanced budget. The restricted budget that I had mentioned earlier was basically that not all funds can be spent on anything that the district decides. I think this is something which all of us need to really follow and understand. Even though we may have the cash, the district cannot really decide on what we can spend on. It's all governed and dictated by rules and regulations, which is on the right-hand side, which is state and federal law dictate what the allowable expenditures are, even for general fund dollars. The other important concept for everyone to understand is spending authority. And some of the most important things over here is it is illegal for the school district to exceed its total spending authority. And spending authority is the amount of spending, or rather, spending is the amount of spending authority a district has, and not the amount of cash or the fund balance that the district has. This is very important concept to understand. You may have the cash, but you may not have the spending authority. And the biggest driver for spending authority is that it is tied to the student enrollment. So where does the spending authority come from? The number of students that are enrolled, what is the cost per pupil? You multiply the two and you get the total current spending authority. Something that we should bear in mind is that the enrollment count is actually the prior year's count. That is, October number of the prior year would be used to decide the budget for the following year. The cost per child is set by the Iowa legislature through the SSA. And then the spending authority is funded by a combination of state aid and property taxes. So how can we grow the spending authority? These are the three drivers: increase in supplemental state aid, which is decided by the state, increase in student enrollment, and increase in miscellaneous income. And what has been happening in these three critical areas? So a supplemental aid has been historically been coming down. In the period of 73 to 94, the average growth was 6.42%. The following 15 years, which was from 95 to 2010, it became half of that, which was 3.22%. And in the last decade, it is reduced again to half of what was there in the previous 15 years, and it is 1.77%. So there has been a constant decline in the amount of supplemental state aid that the school districts are getting. The other big driver, which is the enrollment, even though the DE has been projecting a growth, which is in that yellowish line, the district has been projecting a decline in student enrollment, which is the brownish line. The other small component is the increase in miscellaneous income, which is not a very huge or significant portion of the overall funds for the district. So
just a few notes on what was just shared by Shashank. Our SMART goals are the product of our school board really attempting to get very strategic in how they govern the district and really following a student outcomes-based approach to governance. We've been monitoring those 3 SMART goals, and we have a social emotional learning SMART goal that is under development, that is not yet worded in the form of a SMART goal. Unfortunately, due to our interruption of the school year, we're losing some progress on achieving those goals. Additionally, because of the COVID situation, we've had some additional expenses. We wanted to continue to serve our students in as meaningful a way as possible, and that meant, we thought, getting a device into the hands of each of our students and making sure that each of our students had access to the internet. We had about 5,000 homes serving way more than 5,000 students that did not have internet connectivity. And so we've provided that starting last month, and we'll continue that through the close of the school year. And that has come at no small cost. Additionally, as Shashank indicated, there is, of course, on the horizon, some uncertainty in what the revenue picture will mean for us, as tax revenues will likely fall significantly, meaning that we're also attempting to not only address very strategically the SMART goals that the board has set in front of us, but also to prepare for what may be some further reductions in revenues as the state chooses how to respond to a likely significant decrease in both sales and income tax, and to a lesser extent, probably property tax as well. Another note just to highlight, because it is a unique dynamic in school finance in our state, the concept of spending authority. We have a very healthy fund balance. Our solvency ratio exceeds what the board set as a 15% goal. However, we have been trying to build up an unspent spending authority balance, and we've been doing that and been successful in doing that. That's so important, because if we fall below the spending authority, regardless of how much cash we have on hand, then the state can actually come in and take action, and that's certainly something that we don't want to have happen. So we continue to try to build up our unspent spending authority, and it may be useful to think of that as a credit limit. So an example that I've used in the past is if you have a credit card that has a $1,000 spending limit and you have $5,000 in the bank, the credit card company doesn't really care that you have $5,000 in the bank. They're not going to allow you to exceed the $1,000 purchasing limit that you have on your credit card. And that's the challenge that's been before us for the last couple of years. While we've had the cash on hand to support the level of spending that we're engaging in, the state limits how much we're able to spend on a per student basis year over year. Something that our state does very well is fund every single student in our state equally. But when you have a district like DMPS with some particular challenges in terms of socioeconomic diversity and language diversity, sometimes a higher level of spending is required for some students to give them a level playing field to achieve equity of outcomes. And so something that our state can do a better job of, I believe, is funding based on need, rather than ensuring that every single student is funded equally. That I'll turn things back over to you, Shashank.
Thank you, Tom. So what has been our district's financial strategy? And I'm going to share in the next few slides about them. The first and foremost, what is the assumptions? And I know this is an extremely busy slide, and I don't plan to talk about every item over here. The few items, however, I would want to highlight is the state supplemental aid. As some of you may have read in the press, the SSA that has been granted to all the districts across Iowa is 2.3%. As Tom had mentioned, there's more. It's fairly standard across everyone, and there's no differentiation there. The cost per student for our district is $7,096, which is basically a 2.3% increase of what it was last year. So as part of this, the new money that we are getting is around $2.7 million. And just as an information, a 1% increase in salary for our staff, including benefits, is a little over $3 million. The short-term investment rates, we do have a healthy cash balance, but unfortunately, because of COVID, the rates have come significantly down. We were at 1.5 to 2.5% rate in FY20, but now we are projecting anything between 20 to 75 basis points. It could go further down, and we are struggling to get the higher end of 75 basis points. As far as compensation goes, we have already negotiated with one of the largest union, which is the Teachers Association, and the other unions are still in progress and hopefully should be ironed out soon. And as an end, I would basically say what I had mentioned earlier was balanced budget. That is, resources should cover the expenditure as required by law. There is no give in that. The next slide. So what has been our fiscal strategy so far? In FY20, we saw that our unspent spending authority was reducing year over year. And we realized that we could, unless the situation was changed, unless we took some drastic steps, we could be in a negative spending authority. And if we are to maintain a positive spending authority, if we do not maintain a positive spending authority, then the state can take over and start dictating certain things. So the management discussed, and we decided that for 3 years, which was fiscal year 20, 21, and 22, we would be reducing $24 million in each of those 3 years, with a total decrease of $72 million. And our spending authority, as part of this process, would go from 2% to 6.1 to 12.5. FY20 has been going extremely well. And if you see the column on the right-hand side, instead of 2% that we were projecting, we would hopefully end the year with somewhere around 3.3%. So we revisited and said, should we be as aggressive as $24 million, or should we look at a number, a lower number, and help us achieve that target? So we toned it down to $14 million. And if you were to see, even with that reduction of $14 million, we are very close, or we are actually a tad bit higher than what we were projecting with a $24 million cut, which we had done last year. We are projecting to end FY21 with 6.2. The caveat, however, is we don't know how COVID is going to impact, how much of it will get reimbursed, and what the final number would be. Something else I would like to highlight is the reason why we decided $14 million is if we were to take an increase across our district of 3%, it almost equates to $14 million. So in effect, what we are saying over here is if we reduce 14%, there's no growth in fixed costs, and we are maintaining the fixed cost as flat. The other thing I would want to highlight in this slide is that it's going to become increasingly difficult for us to continue to reduce these expenses unless we take some really hard decisions. So this year, as we were developing the budget, we had a little bit of a change in strategy from what we had from the last year. The basic change that we brought about was we engaged a subset of cabinet members, which formed the budget advisory team. The hierarchy that we have within the district is we have the chiefs, followed by the cabinet members. And in FY20, fiscal year 20, we had expanded the cabinet members. So we formed a team with a subset of cabinet members who became the budget advisory teams, and they presented the recommendation to the chiefs. Amongst the chiefs, we discussed, and then now we are presenting, Tom and myself are presenting that budget to you and to the board. Yeah. So who were the members over here? I won't go into the individual names, but the only thing I would want to highlight is we had a group which consisted of members from across the district, financial services, human resources, operations, the school, student and family services, teaching and learning. So everyone was represented as we were coming up with the budget ideas. What was the direction that was given to this advisory team? The two key metrics that we needed to focus on was the spending authority and the solvency ratio, which both Tom and myself mentioned briefly in the earlier section there. We were to provide recommendations with minimal impact to employees. And we were to look not just at cost reduction ideas, but also revenue generating ideas. Both cost reduction and revenue generating ideas would help us in achieving our goals or the metrics of spending authority and solvency ratio. And as I had mentioned earlier, the recommendations will continue to become more difficult unless we make some really hard decisions. I also wanted to touch upon over here on the SMART goals. So for the first 3 SMART goals that we had formed, we basically decided to have a strategy to focus, even though it was starting from grade 3, we said we cannot ignore the kindergarten to grade 3 because they are the foundation stone, which will really help us achieve the overall objectives. So the focus, so we started spending resources, effort, and time and money starting from kindergarten. The other thing was this 3-year budget plan actually captures much far beyond the traditional instructions that we have under Gen Ed, special education, ELL, and other things. And the position included instructional coach, interventionists, and other roles that were set up. We did not split the costs between literacy and math at this point in time, though in the later time we would definitely be evaluating it because we needed to do some time and motion study to really come up with that. The source of funding were TLC, Title I, curriculum adoption, early readers, EQPD, and Iowa Core. So how much are we actually spending on these 3 SMART goals to achieve our targets? The total cost, as you would see in the last row, is approximately a little over $24 million, which is a huge amount of money. But the way we have decided to go about it is basically repurpose and reprioritize the spend that the district has today to achieve these SMART goals. If you would see the 3 FTE for curriculum coordinators and math coordinators, those are the only 2 people who are really sitting in the central office. So minimal increase as far as central office goes. The biggest cost or the chunk of the cost is coming at the school buildings, which is $22.3 million. The other thing that we had looked over here was some of the consulting contracts that we had. We have dumbed them down, reduced some cost over there, and increased focus on the PD for the staff over here. By the entire effort and the various actions that we have taken, something I would really want to highlight is that the overall cost is neutral. This does not add to any increased cost for the district because we have reprioritized and repurposed the staff to spend time to achieve these 3 SMART goals. The SEL goal, which is the 4th goal and which started at a little bit later than the first 3 goals, we have had at this point in time spent the least amount of time and effort on that. The cost, as you see over here, are a little over $500,000, and we still have not landed up as to what the cost for year 2 and year 3 is. The plan is that sometime between June, July, we would know what the cost would be for the 3-year plan. The source of funding for SEL, or the social emotional learning, is going to be from Title IV and DOP. The plan, again over here, is that it will remain cost neutral with no increases in cost, repurposing our dollars to achieve the 4th SMART goal as well. So what are the financial measures and objectives which we as a district have? The first and foremost was certified enrollment, and we want it to be stable or growing. And as I had shared earlier in a slide, we are projecting a decrease. And if we look at the decrease, and if we look at the slides, we have been reducing year over year as far as the certified enrollment goes. The unauthorized unspent budget was to maintain or build, and we are achieving this thing extremely well. As you would see again on the right-hand side, the two columns, it shows the 20 estimate and 21 estimate, and we are growing over there. The spending authority, our target was 15%, and we are inching towards that target. It is estimated to finish FY20 at 3.3 and projecting at 6.2 for 2021. The solvency ratio, we are doing better than what we had projected. The state supplemental aid last year was 2.06%, and this year, as I had mentioned earlier, is 2.3%. And the overall settlement with the DMEA, which is the largest union consisting of teachers, the last year, the base pay and the health benefit cost increase was 1.87% versus 2.91%. Having said that, we have to keep in mind that we increased the health benefit cost for the employees. So even though the base pay was a little bit higher, the overall impact came down to be significantly lower. So what did the district do to reduce the costs of $14 million in FY21? We reclassed leases and repairs from general fund to Pepple and Save. This was the single largest driver in helping us reduce the cost in general fund. This was $5.5 million. We managed to negotiate a smaller increase for medical insurance with the health provider than what we were budgeting earlier. We did the same with the salary increase. We managed to negotiate a rate which was lower than what we were budgeting. And then there were smaller ticket items like the software reduction. We looked at certain softwares which we were not using it as much, so we decided to effectively eliminate them. So the total expenditure reduction in general fund based on these initiatives was a little over $9 million. The revenue drivers that we had was an additional E-rate rebate. We had filed a few years back with the government, FCC, to get rebate on the technology that we had provided in our school buildings. The rebates have been approved, but it's been held up. And I'm sure COVID is probably adding to some of the delay over there. But hopefully we should be in a position to get $2.2 million in FY21. The other item which helped us was we were budgeting an SSA increase of 1%. And as I had mentioned earlier, it came to 2.3%. That is adding an additional $2 million. Also, we had budgeted a decrease in enrollment of 470, and the actual decrease came to 182. So that also helped us increasing the revenue for the district. Total of these items come a little shy of $5 million. So as you would see, expenditure reduction was a little over $9 million. Revenue recommendations were a little shy of $5 million, and the total amount was $14 million. The DMPS staffing, we have kept it flat between FY20 to 21. As you are aware, the single largest cost for the district is the staff cost. And if we maintain it at flat, that definitely helps. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is, thanks to all of you, we approved the transition from the SCAVO school to SCAVO program. The way it helped us, we continued to provide the students the same learning which they were getting under the SCAVO school in SCAVO program, but certain positions which were no longer needed because it was now not a school but a program were then repurposed within the district. There were certain open positions which, if we had not taken the initiative of converting the school to a program, we would have had to go outside the district to fill these positions. And here we were able to repurpose the existing staff to these positions, and that effectively helped us save almost $2 million. I wouldn't call it saving, but at least we did not have to go out to fill those positions. Tom, anything to add?
Yes, just one note. Shashank had referenced making some hard decisions to reach our budget goals over the out years, the next 2 or 3 years. And what's important, and Shashank discussed this in one of the previous slides, is that when year over year, the supplemental state aid, which really is the by far the big driver of our budget, when those increases for over 10 years do not keep up with the increasing cost of doing business, even without adding services or adding staff, then that's a pattern that needs to be corrected, or we run into a spending authority issue. And so those hard decisions, we've been making tougher and tougher decisions in the last couple of years. One of the most notable ones for the upcoming year is shifting the Scavo Alternative School to the Scavo Alternative Program. That was a very tough decision, something that we felt was necessary in order to meet our goals. We're still going to be able to serve our students effectively, but it's going to be more challenging for sure. And some of you may remember that for this fiscal year, one of the cuts that we had announced a year ago was that we no longer have an adult education program. Again, those were dollars that were Pearl levy dollars that we repurposed for things that were closer to our core mission. And the decisions moving forward, I can promise you, will not become any easier. So it's just important for everyone to recognize that when the state is funding schools at a rate much lower than what has historically been the case, and we've been in this current cycle now for about 10 years, certain realities kick in, and we just cannot continue to do everything that we've always done and still pay our bills.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for those clarifications. I think that definitely helps out. So what is the board adopting and certifying? So what we are proposing is that our total resources for the year is $801 million. And just a caveat over here that this is all funds and not general funds. So the revenue that we're expecting in all the funds is $581 million. And we had a beginning balance of $219 million. So the total resources would be $801 million. What you would notice over here transferred out, this is the debt service amount that we have to allocate and we have to keep as we have certain revenue bonds that we were issued. So total expenditure 568. And as part of this process, if you would see that our ending fund balance is growing from the beginning fund balance by almost $13 million. So we are going in the right direction. The second thing is the proposed tax rate is going to be 18.6. And as you would see in the next slide, we are keeping it flat with what it was in FY20. So FY20 and FY21, both the years would have the same property tax rate. There is no change. So what are the long-term implications and consideration that we need to keep in mind? General fund is the largest fund in the district, as most of you know. It accounts for approximately 78% of all the money in Des Moines Public Schools. Anything that does not have to be accounted for in any other fund gets accounted in general fund. And the two key and distinct complementary issues, which both Tom and myself had mentioned earlier, was the fund balance cash and spending authority. And spending authority is what limits the amount of funds that we have to spend and not the cash balance. These two concepts are very important for all of us to understand as we manage and run the Des Moines Public Schools. So what is the forecast? Again, this is an extremely busy slide. I'm not going to talk about everything. You have the deck. It is recorded. You can have access to that. And the deck will also be posted. But some of the things I really wanted to focus on is what is happening to the solvency ratio. So as you would see, the solvency ratio continues to grow. The other item I would want to highlight is the unspent spending authority ratio. Again, that is growing gradually, starting in FY 2019 from 2.3% and growing up to almost 12% by fiscal year 2024. The other thing I would want to highlight is this assumptions box, which is at the lower table of the slide, which is at the lower end of the slide here. So if you remember, we said that in FY 21, we got the SSA or supplemental state aid of 2.3%. Just like in FY 21, when we were budgeting for FY 21 and FY 20, we had forecasted a 1% growth in SSA. That is what we are forecasting. And that is what I was highlighting, that when we had some savings in SSA, we had projected to a 1.1% and we got 2.3%. The same way we are forecasting an enrollment of decrease of 250 students. And the inflation that we are budgeting for is 1%. And this is basically trying to highlight what are the assumptions that we have as a district from FY 21 to all the way to FY 24. And if these projections turn out to be better, then that definitely helps the district.
As Shashank mentioned earlier, and I guess I did as well, if you go to our district website, which you can find at dmschools.org, you will find lots of budget information, including this PowerPoint presentation that we just shared with you. And you will also find a way to submit questions, and we will respond and post the responses to each of those questions, so that we have essentially a virtual asynchronous dialogue around the proposed budget for Des Moines Public Schools for FY 21. I also want to thank everyone for rolling with us through this very, very challenging school year. I've been working at home since the 14th of March. It is driving me crazy. Shashank has been working at home since March 14th, and he's weathering those challenges as well. But more importantly, I want to make sure that I highlight that all of our staff has been thrown into a very challenging situation where we've essentially transitioned from a centuries-old mode of operation where we bring children into our schools and teach them in classrooms and try to support them in a whole variety of ways, from providing social emotional support such as counseling and therapy, providing nutritional support in the form of breakfast and lunch, and in some cases snacks and dinners, and providing a wide range of extracurricular and co-curricular activities for the development of the whole child, in addition to all the academic opportunities that we provide. And our teachers and support staff have transitioned into attempting to accomplish all of those tasks virtually. So I want to express my sincere gratitude for the dedication and flexibility of the entire DMPS team. I also want to call attention to and express my gratitude to all of our families, because all of you are weathering a similar circumstance in your own families and in your own professional lives. And working from home, especially when school is not in session, is a difficult transition to make. And we appreciate everything that you're continuing to do to support the work that we're attempting to do on behalf of your children, and helping us and helping your students not lose sight of the vital importance of their continuing growth academically. whatever happens with this pandemic and whatever the next years may bring and how we're forced to respond to this, ultimately we still have that same goal in mind so that every single one of our graduates are prepared for the next stage of their life. Shashank?
Thank you, Tom. As Tom had mentioned, the financial information and the fiscal year 21 preliminary budgets are located at this site, which is the budget.dmschools.org. You can send your comments or questions regarding the budget to the email address which is mentioned over here, which is budget@demoineschools.org, or you could even call up and leave a voicemail. This is a number at the school district. We will get it through our email addresses, any voicemail that is left over there, and we will be more than happy to respond. As I had mentioned in the opening slides, we would be keeping and getting all the comments and questions till 15th. We will try to respond them as and when we get the questions as soon as possible. And we would have a public hearing on 19th. The board meeting would be on May 19th, and we'll adopt and certify the budget. And the only thing I would want to close is that these are extremely strange circumstances, as Tom had mentioned. But one day we will look back at these days. We will come out stronger, healthier, and I would appreciate all of us maintaining the social distancing and hanging in there. If you have any questions, please send them to me. Thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Shashank, and thank you, DMPS community.